Welcome to Coast Vue, the show that every single day celebrates the men and women who are making coastal Mississippi such an amazing place to live, work, and play. And in some cases, we celebrate people who sort of have their roots here, but they're doing incredible things in other places, and that's what today's show is all about. Hey, before we get to our guest, I just wanted to say a few things. As you know, the show is not about politics, and if you're a regular listener, you really know that. We don't talk about issues very often unless those issues are critical to coastal Mississippi. One issue that I spent a lot of time discussing last year was coastal Mississippi tourism. And ultimately, I and a lot of other coast leaders were deeply concerned about what I referred to as systemic changes that led to Milton Segarra's firing. He was the prior executive director of the tourism effort. Harrison County Supervisor Connie Rocco is up to it again. She's fiddling with the Coastal Mississippi Tourism Board. What she did last week is the very reason I got focused on Coastal Mississippi Tourism Organization in the first place. It's embarrassing. And I'm really surprised, to be quite honest with you, that Beverly Martin and board president Kent Jones voted with Connie. To me, that's dumbfounding, and I'm searching to understand better about it, because if you go watch the video, it was clear that what Connie was saying conflicted with what Rebecca Powers was saying about Brooke Schultz, the chairman of the board, the current chairman, what Brooke Schultz's intentions were. So what was the rush? Why not work to get a better understanding of the stated reasons for the situation? And so what Connie did was incredibly unacceptable. But I think her actions serve actually as a clarion call for change. I think if you really want to understand this, especially after what we went through last year, go to the Coast Vue Facebook page and watch the YouTube video that I posted. I actually have this note in there, but at 2 hours and 13 minutes into the meetings when the conversation starts. I'm not at all surprised by this, unfortunately, sadly, because I think the systemic problems that led to Milton Segarra's firing were not fixed. Too many elected officials, including actually some Harrison County legislators, worked too hard behind the scenes to sweep the issues underneath the rug, and that is a major issue. And I think what they should have been doing is working to better understand the situation and to find out what can be tweaked about coastal Mississippi tourism to help us solve the problem. We need leadership. I got a call from Representative Manley Barton yesterday. He's a legislator from Jackson County. He's leading by example, working to better understand the situation in a way that we would expect the other legislators to lead, and he should be. It seems to me more than interesting that some Harrison County legislators are working overtime to stop discussions about legislative fixes. If I was a legislator in Jackson County or in Hancock County, I'd really want to know why. I'd want to dive deep, and certainly that's what Manley is doing. Meanwhile, inside the Coastal Mississippi organization, it's collapsing. Just in the last 2 weeks, the director of marketing, the senior marketing manager, the public relations manager, and the digital content manager all resigned. This is devastating news. These incredible employees were doing good work in spite of all the issues related to board governance that enabled too much micromanaging by board members. It's not good. Maybe, just maybe, folks will listen to me and many others in the business, tourism, and gaming communities who are deeply concerned about the wounds being way too fresh in the wake of the issues that led to Milton Segarra's firing for something like this to already have raised its head. But again, I'm not surprised because nothing was fixed. We're going to all work overtime this time to make sure that nothing is swept under the rug. So, Houston, we got a problem. More on this tomorrow when I talk to John Harrison. We'll see you tomorrow to talk more about that. Now we're going to shift gears and move over to my friend Angela Guice. She's the founder and executive producer for New Contacts. If you missed my first conversation with Angela, it was quite a treat. We're going to give you a little bit of a refresher on what some of her background is. But before we go any further, let me say good morning to my good friend Angela. How are you doing?
Good morning, Ricky. So good. How are you?
It's great to see you. Hey, listen, the last time we talked, you guys are super creative. You had this wonderful setup that you were in. And today, once again, for people who are not on Facebook or YouTube who are watching this, either listening to this on the radio or using a podcast, You got a nice little background again. You know, you guys, you and your husband are incredibly creative. And do I see an Emmy behind you?
Yes, we won an Emmy back in 2020 for a project we did with DreamWorks for International Women's Day, which is like extra special, of course, as a female business owner. So yeah, we can say we're Emmy Award winning now, which is pretty cool. But yeah, so good to be back with you, Ricky, and, you know, interesting to hear everything going on down there on the coast. Obviously, you know, my family's been involved in the Tourism Commission, you know, advertising business since I was basically born. So it's interesting to hear all the latest and look forward to chatting with you today.
Yeah, you heard my comments at the beginning. I'm so deeply disappointed. I think, you know, at the end of the day, it's embarrassing that these things continue to happen. I do think that there's some great leadership in coastal Mississippi. A lot of people are watching it closely. When you look, you know, Angela, when you look at after the startup occurred, after we shut down, after the world shut down for the pandemic, Mississippi actually was in the top 3 of recovery. And if you go start to look at what are the things that were driving that, tourism was driving that. And if you start looking at the numbers that drove that, coastal Mississippi drove that. So it's incredibly important for us to get this right. And we've got to quit having these dust ups that are affecting too many people. And in the case of the Coastal Mississippi organization specifically, the fact that they've had this mass defection in the last few days of their entire marketing team, or at least most of them, it's certainly their leadership is not good to see. And your dad, Reed Guice, as you pointed out, was deeply involved. Your mother as well, and so many years of promoting coastal Mississippi. And you had to have been proud of their leadership on that issue.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, it's obviously having lived in LA for 20 plus years now and having brought so many people to coastal Mississippi over the years from, you know, LA, New York, Europe, you know, my husband's from Sweden. So, you know, we've brought people from all over the world and everyone is always so blown away with the hospitality and it just continues to get better and better. So, you know, it's so important to have good leadership and good marketing, which is obviously my specialty. It's so important to have that. And it's just a shame to not have a good team behind it. So yeah. You know, and there's so many people down there that I know that I'm personally friends with who are just, you know, including yourself and lots of folks who just are trying to promote all of the good happening down there. And it should be an easy thing to do because there's so much happening and so much progressive in terms of the offerings. When you look at a city like Austin or Nashville or cities that have really like changed, especially during the pandemic, there is just such opportunity there to become a destination.
You know, it's something that I talk about all the time. If you mentioned Austin and Nashville, and then there's Chattanooga, and there's many others that have created such a sense of place that in the new economy, we talk about the people who are part of the new economy. You know, it could be creative people, could be copywriters, could be lawyers, could be a wide range of people can really choose where they want to live. And what's happening here in coastal Mississippi, if you look at the collection of communities that you know very well that make up this wonderful place we call coastal Mississippi, mixed use and bringing vibrance back to downtown and density back to downtown. People want to live, work, and play in a similar area. That's happening. And you know, you make your visits to Biloxi regularly. What's happening in downtown Biloxi right now is unbelievable, and it's going to continue to be that way. So we are in a unique spot. We have a unique setup. We're a coastal region that's this collection of great communities, each with their own special sense of place. And we can rival a Nashville or an Austin if we keep things moving forward and we keep strategically focused. And we don't let things like this coastal Mississippi tourism issue continue to raise its head. We need to tweak it, fix it, do whatever we need to do so that it's behind us and can be focused on doing nothing other than promoting this great place. That's what they're supposed to be doing. Too much junk going on, unfortunately. But you know what, Angela, I enjoy celebrating people who've gone off to do amazing things and the work that you've done building this great company and the people that you've worked with. Again, we'll review some of that, but you've done well. But before we go any further, I just want to say congratulations on being a mother. You guys just celebrated Father's Day. Man, it's got to be special.
it's been amazing. It's been all of the things that I expected and all the things I never expected, but we're very blessed that he's just a great kid. And, I never kind of knew what it would be like to be a business owner, a very busy entrepreneur, and being a mother, but it's awesome. We're rocking it, 95% of the time.
Well, your husband is a great husband. He's a wonderful father, and he's a business partner. When we come back, you can tell us about your partnership with your husband and what New Context is all about, and we'll kind of rebuild some of that base. And then we'll talk about some of the unique stuff that you've been involved in, certainly during the pandemic, and how you created a competitive advantage, and then, some of the stuff you're working on today. We'll be back with Angela Guice after this break. Welcome back to Coast Vue. I have my friend Angela Guice, who lives in California. She's from Biloxi. She makes it back here all the time. Her father is Reed Guice, and she's done incredibly well as an executive producer and CEO, founder actually of a Los Angeles-based company called New Context. Hey, why don't we tell people what New Context is, and then you can tell me the unique role your husband plays in that organization.
So we are basically an advertising production company for television networks and brands who do branded content for TV networks. So we do a lot of work with the Walt Disney Company, ABC, Freeform, Hulu, Netflix, Viacom, like now they're Paramount, BET. We just did, so we basically shoot video and key art for launches of a lot of big shows. We just did the Kardashians launch on Hulu, which of course went on to be the number one streaming show of all time on Hulu, which is great. So we did the key, all the movie posters, all the photography, all the video. We just did the marketing campaign for the Oscars this year with Amy Schumer, Wanda Sykes, and Regina Hall, which was pretty awesome. I got to hold an Oscar, so that was cool. And we just did the promotional campaign for the BET Awards, which is airing this weekend. And we're kind of venturing into a little bit of long form. If you're a fan of the show Only Murders in the Building, we just shot the after show, which is going to start airing this weekend. It'll be airing after all the episodes of Only Murders in the Building with, Steve Martin and Martin Short and Selena Gomez. So pretty cool. I grew up in the advertising world. My parents own an ad agency in Biloxi. So it's kind of, I never thought I'd end up back in advertising. I always wanted to make movies and features and whatnot, but it just was, I guess I just couldn't escape it. So, I saw my parents working together, and it was never on my vision board that I would be working with my husband, who started out in video games and making apps and things like that, back in the sort of mid 2000s. And when we got together, kind of saw what I was doing and started writing treatments. And so in addition to, his own projects, we also work together. He's a director. So he directs a lot of our projects, especially the technical, stuff that has like VFX or special motion control, motion capture, things like that. He's a tech guy. So in addition to doing that, he also is kind of ventured into the NFT space, which is like a whole nother conversation I can't even speak to, but would be an interesting guest for perhaps your listeners to hear about that world, because I'm just still trying to figure it out. But yeah, it's a fun gig, always working with different people, amazing creatives, working on some of the biggest campaigns in entertainment in terms of television and streaming. So I'm very grateful.
So I know that time flies fast when you're busy. I was a CEO for 16 years of my career, and I look back and think, wow, what a whirlwind. Because when you're in the moment, it's hard to sit back and reflect and think about what you've been through. But you go look at the list, and we went through the whole thing, and I won't list it out here. But you went way beyond television and film. You worked with Lizzo. You actually got nominated for an MTV VMA award. Foo Fighters, Blink-182, Taylor Swift, Kanye West, Miley Cyrus, the Jonas Brothers, Nelly. The list goes on and on. But then the greats, Steven Spielberg and Robert Redford and Quentin Tarantino and Jennifer Aniston. Incidentally, it's interesting that Jennifer made the comment she made the other day about people who were famous who did nothing. But I thought to myself, wow, think of the Kardashians. To create a brand that's worth over $1 billion, that's doing nothing. I would say they're actually geniuses, wouldn't you?
I definitely would. And, I'd always very much admired, Kris Jenner, who I think will go down as one of the great marketing geniuses of our time. And having helping her daughters create brands for themselves. I mean, it's a thing that was unheard of. And, they've used their show and their celebrity to create multi-billion-dollar brands. So, there's always going to be controversy, but how they say haters going to hate. But, having met Kris and seen what she's done and, just utmost respect for all those ladies, because they work extremely hard to do what they do, for sure. But yeah, it is a whirlwind, and we're celebrating this year 16 years in business since I started New Contacts back in 2006. And I was just thinking, sometimes I do have to kind of just pinch myself, because we get on these projects, we get on these jobs, and you have to just take a moment where it's like, you do have to stop for just a second, because the time just it's a blink. You mentioned all those people, and as you list them off, I can remember where I was and we were working together and all that. It all goes by so fast. The same as they say with kids, right? I'm like, my kid's almost a year old. I literally blinked, and here we are almost celebrating his first birthday. But I think it's, you bring up a good point of just taking a time to have gratitude and really take it in, because our lives are always busy no matter what you do.
But what I see you doing as a mother, because of course you and I are friends on social media. What I see you doing is what I think whether men or women who have kids who are working hard, especially CEOs, but people can be the CEO of their family or the CEO of a division of a company. You know what I mean? I mean, anyone can be a CEO of their world. But what I see you trying to do is working really hard to find the balance. But it's impossible to ever get balance. You know that. But you're soaking up being a mother. It's clear that you are.
I really am. And what's interesting? I was nervous for many years. It was a really long journey for us to have a child. And, it was during that process, I was always just completely unsure of how I would do it, because I am so committed to my job, and my job is really kind of, my career, not my job. It's, my life. It's really this business, my team, my clients. It's my passion of what I love to do. And so, how do you fit a child into this, and knowing that they're going to need a certain level? And it's interesting, some people, and particularly women, I was surprised by this, would tell me like, oh, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to replace yourself? How are you going to do both? Like, I wasn't getting a whole lot of positive reinforcement of how to balance how I possibly could. So once it was go time, I knew that I just had to do it. And the thing is I think as women, and maybe men too, we are capable of many, many things. And I think it's, why not? Why not have it all? It is possible to have it all with the right support system, of course, which rolls deep, my husband and, having childcare, and doing all of it also without having any family nearby. We're kind of on an island. Family's in Mississippi, his family's in Sweden. But I mean, if there's any comment I could say about it, it's really you trust in yourself, because you're going to find the energy to do it. And I think it's most important too, for me, to set an example for my son that, I had my mom was such a big figure in my life. And I always saw her living her dream and living her passion, which was, being a badass business lady. And so, I think it's a good role model for my son, I have my energy that I spend with him, and then I have my energy kind of living my passion and my dream. And, hats off to stay-at-home moms though, because I honestly think that job is 100 times harder than my job. I was with him for just 100% for those first couple of months. And that is a hard job. It's harder than what I do, for sure.
Hey, so that's something I'm curious about. I remember early in my career, I got some very significant opportunities to work at the corporate level. And I remember one time I was in a meeting in Boston, and to the right of me was the chairman of the board, and to the left of me was the president of the company. And there were a few others in the room. And here I was sitting there, Ricky from Mississippi. And I remember thinking to myself, gosh, why? How did I get here? Do I really deserve to be here? Can I hang with these, Harvard and Yale graduates and all these other folks? And I guess you have that feeling for a time that's you better fake it till you make it kind of deal, or you can feel everybody feels a stage of life where a little bit of that imposter syndrome sets in. But the reality was, as I continued to work, I came to understand that my education was really good. My ability to hang was as good as theirs, and that I could be a leader even in this group, which I've ultimately came to understand. It took a while. The other, you'll have a sense of where I'm going with this. So that's one part of that. But when you're around really important people, in my case, the chairman of the board, or it could be in an editorial board with a governor, it could be meeting with a celebrity. When you're a publisher of a newspaper, which I had the opportunity to do at 3 Coast newspapers, and I had responsibilities for newspapers in five states, you get the opportunity to be around a lot of celebrities. When we come back on the other side, I want to talk about your metamorphosis and some aspect of all of this as it relates to being around celebrities, and what does that mean to you? We'll come back to that on the other side.
He's the former president and publisher of the Sun Herald, and now he's on the radio. Welcome to Coast Vue with Ricky Matthews on SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1.
Welcome back to Coast Vue. I have my friend Angela Guice with us. She is from Biloxi, but she is the founder and executive producer of a company called New Context. They're Los Angeles based, and they work with some of the biggest media companies in the United States. When we came back, before we went to break, I was sort of explaining at a young age, as I started to sort of grapple with success and all of that. There's a point in that process where you sort of begin to arrive and start to see that you can hang and whatever. I'm sure you went through that yourself. The other thing was I would be around important people. I would say one of the most significant sort of realizations I had, it was the time I spent with George Bush after Hurricane Katrina. Met with him many, many, many times because I worked with Haley Barbour on the recovery effort. And I always tried to sort of match this public persona that was emanating from George Bush with what I was experiencing on the ground. And it was always this dichotomy. I couldn't help it. I mean, what I was experiencing was different than what other people would say about him. In fact, what I found was a very caring man who really wanted to chat and enjoy life and whatever. But then again, there's been some other people I've been around that were so egotistical you couldn't cut them with a knife. Tell me about that metamorphosis for you.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's interesting because, the imposter syndrome and fake it till you make it. I mean, I think that's basically, you have to go through that in Hollywood for sure. I mean, in many different aspects of, business, I'm sure, but especially out here. And I started New Context. Well, I started really producing before I even started the company, I was probably like 23 or 24, which is insane to me now. But, I would do an interview. I remember, doing one of my first maybe celebrity interviews. I think it was with Jack Black. And I was terrified almost to the point of being paralyzed. And Jack Black is as cool and as nice as you would imagine him being, which was great. But, you know, thinking back on that, I'm like, how did I even get through that? And now, you know, I don't get as starstruck, I think, as I used to, because just as I've grown in my career and have, you know, worked with lots and lots of folks. But I mean, there's still moments where, you know, many moments throughout my career where I'm just like, I really hope I'm projecting an air of knowing what I'm doing, because I feel like I don't. But then you go past it and, you know, 15, 16 years later, you know, you're working with, you know, at the corporate level, you know what I mean? Presidents, CEOs of major networks. Those are the people that I get starstruck over now. It's less the celebrities and more of, you know, let's say showrunners, or I think when I got to meet the president of the Academy, that was kind of, you know, the Academy Motion Pictures, that, you know, it's kind of those moments now where you're like, wow, this is big time, you know?
But you know why that is? It's interesting that you would say it that way, because there is a point where you get sort of through the starstruckness of it all, and you know, you find out they're people just like the rest of us, and
yes,
they have a unique job, you know. And I would say the pinnacle of that really is probably the Kardashians and Kris Jenner, as you mentioned a few minutes ago. I mean, what they've been able to accomplish, I mean, is undeniable. And people can say whether it's negative or whether it's positive, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. If they're talking about them and they figured out that is the key to success, is quite amazing. But what I like about you, Angela, and this is sort of a Guice trait, to be honest with you, you are soaking it up. And as a CEO who runs your own business and who's built this company that you have today, I'm not surprised that you would be more enamored with the CEO of a major media company because of what they've been able to accomplish. Just think of the path and the competition that they dealt with and how they had to create competitive advantage for themselves. And now they're in that key position, and all these stakeholders that they have to please, and the strategic direction of the company. You know, Netflix is one of the companies. I read about Netflix this morning and the challenges they're having. Paramount's one of the companies you're working for. Just 6 months ago, Paramount to me was an old brand, and then Yellowstone comes along and they re-establish the way they do streaming, and suddenly Paramount feels to me like a new brand. It's an amazing thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's you know, and I think that's, you have to be consistently reinventing yourself to stay relevant, right? And I think that's you know, a lot of times we help launch new shows. Sometimes we're launching shows. You know, the Kardashians was a show that was on E! For, you know, 15 years, and now they're at a new home. So it's, you know, I feel like with my own brand and with even your personal brand, right? It's like you were once, you know, newspaper publisher. Now you've got a talk show. It's like you have to just constantly be evolving, which is kind of what is exciting about having a career that sort of spans decades, right? Is you see the industry change, you see attitudes in marketing change. So to me, yes, seeing the people behind the curtain, I guess, who are making those decisions and being in the rooms with decision makers and being part of those conversations, to me now is what really excites me about the level in which we're working with, which is so cool. And there's so many more women now, which is exciting to just be around, and kind of, I'm still soaking it in, and we're all, you know, I'm sure as you are, I'm just always learning and taking it all in. And of course, trying to be a role model to those that are coming up too, you know, which is so weird, because I just had a conversation yesterday, and like, you know, someone on my team, they're just like, I love listening to you talk. I love just, you know, you're such a role model. And I'm like, whoa, when I started hearing that word, I was like, I don't feel that old. Am I old enough to be a role model? Because in my head, I'm still 25. You know what I mean?
Oh man, I thought the same thing many, many times. But you know, what's interesting, you mentioned, certainly you see more women who are succeeding greatly. But what I know about you, if you look back in your career, you have a woman card, but you never played the woman card. You never played it. But I want to look at the woman card for a second. How tough was it? How tough is it from time to time? How tough are you? How tough do you have to be? Talk about that for a second.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially when I started the company, I was 26 and literally didn't know better. And I'm glad I took the risk. But, there's still not a lot of female-owned production companies in the space that we're in. And I think even in the commercial production company and the feature film industry, producer-wise, it's still a very small percentage. So, I have to say I'm lucky that in the sort of broadcast cable world, it was always run by a lot of women in the marketing departments. I don't know why, but a lot of women in charge. So that really helped give me the confidence. I had this great network of a social network of women who wanted to see me succeed. And that was cool. But then when you get into the production world, and something we talk about a lot in our industry, there's not a lot of female directors. There's not a lot of female producers. So a lot of that is changing. It's taking a long time, but, I do feel like there's a boys club that, even still some people that maybe don't like working with women, who don't like taking, sort of direction from women. But the boys club is getting a lot smaller. And, I think you do have to prove yourself a little bit extra. You do have to definitely be the smartest one in the room a lot of times. And, I'm sure that it's that way across many industries, but it's been happening since, a long, long time before me, but I do feel like the attitudes are changing, and it is getting easier, I hope, like based on, the way my grandmother, my mother, my aunt, these people who I know have paved the way for, my generation and the next one. So yeah, you do have to work a little bit harder, but I think that it's the way women run a business. At least I feel like we take a certain care, or at least I'm not going to say the collective we, but I know that the way that I do it in the way I run a production, I've been told, is different, than, let's say, a man would run it. Like the nurturing of my crew, of my clients, I think that combined with what we talked about on the last episode that we did together, is that special coastal Mississippi secret sauce of hospitality.
Yeah.
Makes it just a little bit special.
Yeah, I referred to that then as the nice factor.
Yeah.
It's in our DNA.
It's that, and authentically liking people. Like,
yes.
I think
yes.
Something I definitely obviously got from my dad, but I think it's just in the DNA of coastal Mississippi is we like talking to people, just like you were talking about President Bush. It's like we're just nice people, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So look, you have in your company created competitive advantage. You do something very unique. And the beauty of what you do is at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's a man or woman. At the end of the day, you got to produce. You got to produce something that the people who are involved, your customers, your stakeholders are pleased with and get results. That's what you do. That's why you've built this incredible organization that has had, enduring partnerships with some of the biggest media companies in the United States. For the final segment of today's show, we'll kind of come back to that a little bit because I think that's the key to her success. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to Coast Vue. I have my friend Angela Guice, who's the founder, executive producer for a company she formed called New Context. When we first talked, we talked about from Biloxi to Hollywood, in some respects back to Biloxi, because she has this beautiful home that she's dealt with here. I think you actually have it for sale, or maybe you sold it. I don't know, but it's beautiful. It was beautiful, whatever the situation is related to that. Her dad, Reed Guice, is a good friend, and she's done some amazing work. Hey, but during the break, we were talking about that there's a lot of lessons to learn for anyone who's paying attention to this conversation. There's a lot of lessons to learn. And one of them is that, so oftentimes young people will say, man, I don't want to have to go through that. I want to be able to go be that. I want to go have that position. And I often said, you can't skip steps. If you skip steps, you will eventually pay the piper, but you got to do your reps. You got to pay the piper. You've done that, haven't you?
Yes. I mean, I think it's interesting because we have an internship program and we have interns that start with us. And I have a little speech, which is, we all started out as, in our business, a production assistant, or, in your business, maybe it was just as an assistant or working in the mailroom or whatever that might be. And we all had to work our way up. And it's a lot of trying and learning and failing and learning from every mistake. But there's definitely no, I think if you're trying to skip steps, you're definitely not going to be successful in whatever career you might be attempting, because you learn so much along the way, right? From the successes and the failures.
So as I mentioned when we went to break, you've created sort of a competitive advantage. You know what you're good at. You know what your sweet spot is. You know that. And there's so many details to deal with, and not just details, but creativity that goes with it. And so many stakeholders to please, and so many subcontractors. It's a major operation when you set out to do what you do, isn't it?
It is. And it just keeps getting bigger, which is cooler, but it's also, sometimes I do have to step back on set, and, we might have 100, 120 people on our crew, and you watch this symphony of, logistics and creativity and weeks, sometimes months of planning, to see it all come together, and then see it on screen, and see people, posting it or enjoying it, or, it's such a cool process. There's a show, we were talking about Paramount. There's a show called The Offer on Paramount, which is about the making of The Godfather, which I really recommend if you haven't seen it.
Yeah.
But it's all about sort of this process. And in production, there was a great quote from that series where someone said, we all decided to, leave our real life and join the circus. And that's kind of what production is. It's logistics, it's creative, it's all of it together. And it's very exciting all the time. Never a dull moment.
I looked up and saw my low battery on my computer was on, and I looked down and it wasn't plugged in. So that's what I was doing. I'm sure it probably alarmed you to see me drop away for a second. It is exciting what you've been. It's really exciting to see what you've been able to accomplish. The people that you've been able to work with, the lessons that you eventually, you ought to consider writing a book. And let me tell you, I thought about you recently. Frozen, we have grandkids, so Frozen and Frozen 2. But in Frozen 2, below, if you go to the streaming Frozen 2 on Disney, down below, you'll see the making of Frozen 2, and it's a multi-part series of making of Frozen 2. It's incredible. I've seen it a couple of times. But what goes behind that? It's a years long process. But it is fascinating, the dedicated people that are engaged in it, the most creative, smart. Man, Angela, you have to hang with some really smart people, don't you?
We really do. And I have to say, like, the level, it's been exciting the past few years as we've grown and the projects are getting bigger and more technical and things like that, working with cinematographers who are Academy Award nominated and things like, just people who up your game. And I think that's another kind of, as you do grow, it's, surrounding yourself with people who can help you grow. Right. And in my business, it's directors and cinematographers and producers, production designers. So it's cool to be up leveling and working with a lot of these folks who are so.
And one last thing, in the short time we have left, I often say that people who burn bridges amaze me, because what comes around goes around. You're in a relationship world. Explain to people in a very short period of time here how important it is to maintain relationship.
I have to say that that's been one of the most important lessons and ethoses that I've kept as a business owner, especially in this business, is I've never made an enemy. I firmly believe that competition is BS and that there's enough work to go around for everyone. And that has served me on so many levels. And I feel like burning bridges, never a good, always make a friend. And I think that takes it back to coastal Mississippi. It's just kind of how I was raised. And I'm grateful for for my coastal roots.
Yeah,
Teaching me to be a good person. Because
I knew your mother and your father well. Your father is one of my dearest friends, and he is an amazing mentor. There's no doubt about that. So anyway, Angela Guice, it's been great catching up with you. You have so many wonderful lessons. You should write a book sometime.
Maybe you can help me. You're good at that.
We'll see. We'll see you soon. Congratulations on your success. Thank you.
Thanks, Ricky.
Okay, so tomorrow we have John Hairston. We'll see you tomorrow.